The static crackled through the communications center like electricity before a storm. Commander Marcus Webb stared at the encrypted transmission, reading it 3 times before the words finally registered. A civilian, a billionaire tech entrepreneur, had just been granted operational command authority over DEVGRU Team 6. Not advisory, not consultative, command. "Sir, there must be some mistake," Lieutenant Rodriguez whispered, peering over Webb's shoulder at the classified orders bearing multiple Pentagon signatures. The woman's photograph showed sharp eyes behind designer glasses, perfectly styled hair, and a boardroom smile that belonged in Forbes, not in a military briefing room. Webb's jaw tightened. Zara Kenyatta, age 34, net worth $8.7 billion, military experience 0. The orders were crystal clear. She would direct tomorrow's operation to extract a high-value target from a heavily fortified compound in Somalia. Elite warriors who had spent decades perfecting the art of warfare would now take orders from someone whose biggest battle was probably a hostile corporate takeover. "This is insane," Rodriguez muttered. "What does some Silicon Valley princess know about tactical operations?" But something nagged at Webb. The Pentagon didn't make these decisions lightly, especially not with DEVGRU assets. There had to be more to this story. The briefing materials were unusually thin, containing only basic biographical information and her clearance levels that, he noticed with growing confusion, were higher than his own. The communications center's heavy door opened with a pneumatic hiss. She walked in without ceremony, no entourage, no fanfare. Zara Kenyatta moved with an economy of motion that seemed oddly familiar, though Webb couldn't place why. She wore simple black tactical pants and a navy blue polo shirt, her only concession to wealth being a watch that probably cost more than most soldiers made in a year. "Commander Webb," she said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, calloused in a way that didn't match her public image. "I'm Zara. Thank you for accommodating this unusual arrangement." Webb studied her face, searching for signs of nervousness or uncertainty. He found neither. Instead, he saw something that made his combat-trained instincts twitch, the 1,000-yard stare of someone who had seen violence up close and personal. "Ma'am, with respect, my men are wondering what qualifies you to—" "I know what they're wondering," she interrupted gently. "Tomorrow, they'll understand. For now, I need to see your tactical briefing room and speak with your team leaders. We have 18 hours to prepare for an operation that will either save 12 lives or lose considerably more." The way she said it, clinical, certain, with the weight of genuine consequence, made Webb realize that whoever Zara Kenyatta really was, she wasn't the person her public profile suggested. The briefing room fell silent when Zara entered. 8 of America's most elite special operators looked up from their maps and equipment checks, their expressions ranging from skeptical to openly hostile. Staff Sergeant Travis "Hawk" Patterson, a 15-year veteran whose scarred hands had pulled more triggers than most soldiers ever saw, barely glanced up from cleaning his rifle. "Gentlemen," Webb announced, his voice carrying the tension of the moment, "this is Zara Kenyatta. She'll be directing tomorrow's operation." The silence deepened. Corporal Jamie "Ghost" Morrison, the team's youngest member at 26, couldn't hide his smirk. Master Chief Petty Officer Derek Anvil Johnson, a mountain of a man whose presence commanded respect in any room, slowly stood and crossed his arms. "Ma'am," Anvil's voice rumbled like distant thunder, "no disrespect, but we've been doing this since before you could spell FUBAR. What exactly is your background in tactical operations?" Zara stepped to the briefing table, her movements precise and unhurried. She picked up an aerial reconnaissance photo of the target compound, a maze of concrete walls, guard towers, and defensive positions carved into the Somali hillside. "Sergeant Johnson," she said without looking up, using his rank rather than his call sign. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. "You're wondering if I've ever been in a firefight, if I know what it means to watch good people die because of bad decisions, if I understand what I'm asking you to risk. She traced her finger along the compound's eastern perimeter, marking something the others had missed. This drainage system here, it's newer construction. The concrete is different. It connects to the main structure but wasn't part of the original blueprints from 2018. Ghost leaned forward despite himself. How do you know that? Because I've been tracking this compound for 3 years. Every modification, every structural change, every personnel rotation. She looked up, meeting each man's gaze in turn. 12 aid workers are being held in the lower level. They've been there for 6 days. Their window for survival closes tomorrow at sunset. Hawk finally set down his rifle. You still haven't answered the question about your background. Zara pulled out a tablet and swiped to a satellite feed, real-time imagery that was classified beyond their clearance level. The compound appeared on screen with heat signatures clearly visible through its walls. My background is that I built the surveillance systems currently tracking every person in that building. I designed the communication networks you'll use during extraction, and I've been developing tactical software that can predict enemy movement patterns with 93% accuracy. She paused, her voice growing quieter. But none of that matters if you don't trust me. The room remained silent, but the quality of the silence had changed. These men were warriors, but they were also pragmatists. Anvil uncrossed his arms. Show us what you've got. The holographic display materialized above the briefing table, casting blue light across 8 weathered faces. The compound rotated slowly in 3 dimensions, every room mapped and measured, every blind spot highlighted in red. Zara's fingers danced across the control surface, zooming into sections with surgical precision. Entry Team Alpha approaches from the northwest, she began, her voice taking on the cadence of someone who had run this scenario countless times. The guard rotation changes at 3:47 hours. You'll have a 17-minute window before the Eastern Patrol returns. Ghost studied the layout, his earlier skepticism replaced by professional curiosity. What about the communications array on the roof? Disabled at T-30 seconds. My satellite will hit it with a focused electromagnetic pulse. No explosions, no alerts, just dead equipment. Zara highlighted the pathway from the breach point to the holding area. Bravo Team provides overwatch from positions here and here, while Charlie Team maintains the perimeter. Hawk leaned back in his chair, processing the tactical approach. It was solid, more than solid, it was brilliant. Every contingency had been considered, every variable accounted for. What about extraction? This valley's a killing field once we're compromised. You won't be compromised. The certainty in Zara's voice made several operators exchange glances. At least, not for the first 18 minutes. After that, you'll have air support. What kind of air support? Webb asked. Zara's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. For the first time since entering the briefing room, something personal flickered behind her professional facade. The kind that clears entire grid squares. She manipulated the display to show flight patterns converging on the target area. 2 aircraft, sleek, angular shapes that none of them immediately recognized. Those aren't military, Anvil observed, his tone careful. No, they're not. Zara met his gaze steadily. They're mine, custom-built, stealth-capable, and operated by pilots who understand the stakes. The room erupted in quiet murmurs. Private contractors with advanced aircraft supporting a DEVGRU operation was unusual enough, but the implications ran deeper. This level of coordination, this degree of preparation, it suggested resources and planning that went far beyond what any civilian should possess. Patterson spoke for the first time. Ma'am, who exactly are you? Zara's finger paused over the holographic controls. Someone who lost people in that compound. Someone who spent 3 years making sure we could get them back. The weight of her words settled over the briefing room like smoke. The pre-dawn air carried the scent of desert sage and aviation fuel as the MH-60 Black Hawks spun up on the tarmac. 8 operators moved through their final equipment checks with practiced efficiency, each man carrying 90 pounds of gear that could mean the difference between success and catastrophe. Zara stood apart from the organized chaos, speaking quietly into a secure communicator. Her words were too low to catch, but her body language suggested she was coordinating multiple moving pieces of a complex operation. As the rotor wash intensified, she approached the lead aircraft. "Gentlemen," her voice cut through the mechanical noise, "I'll be monitoring from the command vehicle, but you'll have direct communication throughout the operation. Trust your training, trust each other, and trust that every piece of intelligence I've provided is accurate." Ghost, now wearing full battle gear, looked different than he had in the briefing room, older, more serious. "Ma'am, if this goes sideways—" "It won't." Her interruption was gentle but absolute. "In 4 hours, you'll be back here with 12 civilians who get to go home to their families." Anvil climbed into the lead helicopter, then paused at the door. "You said you lost people in that compound. Family." For a moment, Zara's carefully maintained composure cracked. Something raw and painful flickered across her face before the professional mask slipped back into place. "My team," she said simply. The Black Hawks lifted off into the pre-dawn darkness, their forms quickly disappearing against the star-filled sky. Zara climbed into the mobile command unit, where banks of monitors showed multiple perspectives of the approaching operation. Satellite feeds, aircraft cameras, ground sensors. She had visibility that would make Pentagon planners jealous. "Phoenix Base, this is Anvil Actual," the radio crackled with Johnson's voice. 30 minutes to target." "Copy, Anvil Actual. Weather is clear, no changes to enemy disposition." But as Zara watched the feeds, something nagged at her. The compound's heat signatures showed normal patterns, the guards maintained their routines, everything appeared exactly as predicted. In her experience, operations that went perfectly according to plan were often the most dangerous. She keyed her microphone. "All stations, Phoenix Actual. Maintain heightened awareness, something feels off." In the lead helicopter, Anvil processed her warning. His instincts had kept him alive through 3 deployments and countless operations. If their mysterious commander sensed trouble, he would listen. The radio crackled to life as the helicopters swept across the desert landscape, flying low to avoid radar detection. The rhythmic thrum of rotor blades created a hypnotic backdrop as 8 elite operators prepared for what could be their final mission together. "Phoenix Base, Anvil Actual. We have eyes on target. Compound appears quiet, guard positions as briefed." Johnson's voice carried the steady calm of a man who had done this countless times before. Zara studied the multiple feeds on her screens. The infrared showed 12 heat signatures in the basement holding area. The aid workers were still alive. Guard positions matched her predictions perfectly. Too perfectly. "Anvil Actual, Phoenix Base. I'm seeing nominal patterns across all surveillance. Almost textbook normal." "Copy, that's what's bothering you." "In my experience, nothing is ever textbook normal." She switched frequencies. "Overwatch, Phoenix Base. Report status." "Phoenix Base, Overwatch. We have clear sight lines to all designated positions. No movement outside expected parameters." Hawk's voice joined the communication net from the second helicopter. "Phoenix, we're seeing some electronic emissions from the compound that weren't in the briefing materials. Looks like they've upgraded their communication equipment recently." Zara's fingers flew across her control interface. "Hawk, can you specify frequency range?" "Looks like encrypted burst transmissions. Short duration, high frequency, professional grade." The pieces clicked together in Zara's mind with crystalline clarity. The perfect guard rotations, the upgraded communications, the fact that intelligence on this compound had been remarkably easy to obtain. Someone wanted them here. All stations, Phoenix Actual, her voice cut through the radio chatter with urgent authority. This is a trap. Abort. Repeat, abort operation. But even as she spoke, she knew it was too late. The compound's exterior lights suddenly blazed to life, illuminating the helicopters like insects caught in amber. Heavy machine gun positions that hadn't appeared on any reconnaissance photo opened fire, their muzzle flashes creating deadly constellations in the darkness. Taking fire, taking fire. Ghost's voice crackled through the radio as tracer rounds streaked past the lead aircraft. Phoenix Base, we need immediate extraction. We're lit up like a Christmas tree. Zara's jaw tightened as she watched the tactical situation deteriorate in real time. 8 of America's finest warriors were caught in a perfectly orchestrated ambush, and it was her intelligence that had led them there. The Black Hawk shuddered under heavy fire as Anvil's voice cut through the chaos. Phoenix Base, we're taking significant damage. Request immediate emergency extraction. On her screens, Zara watched tracer fire converge on both helicopters. The lead aircraft's engine began smoking as hydraulic fluid sprayed from punctured lines. The second Black Hawk banked hard left, trying to provide covering fire for its damaged companion. All stations, this is Phoenix Actual. Zara's voice carried absolute command authority. Emergency Protocol 7 is now in effect. Anvil, can you reach the alternate landing zone? Negative, we're going down hard. The lead helicopter auto-rotated toward the desert floor, its pilot fighting to maintain control with failing systems. Zara watched the heat signatures scatter as her team prepared for a crash landing in hostile territory. Hawk status report. We're operational but taking fire, attempting to provide cover for downed aircraft. Zara's fingers moved across her controls with desperate precision. All stations, help is coming. Maintain defensive positions and conserve ammunition. She switched to an encrypted channel that none of the DEVGRU operators could monitor. Raven Flight, this is Phoenix Actual. Emergency authentication Whiskey 7 Alpha. The response came immediately, spoken in a voice that carried years of shared experience and absolute trust. Phoenix, this is Raven Lead. We show your people in serious trouble. Affirmative. 8 operators down in hot landing zone. Permission to engage all hostile targets. Copy Phoenix. Raven Flight is inbound, weapons hot. ETA 4 minutes. Through her headset, Zara could hear the sound of gunfire as her team fought to survive on the ground. Anvil's voice crackled through the static. Phoenix, we've got approximately 30 hostiles in prepared positions. They knew we were coming. Understood, Anvil. Maintain perimeter. Air support inbound. What her team couldn't see from their position was the pair of aircraft screaming across the desert at nearly supersonic speed. The fighters were unlike anything in the current military inventory. Angular, predatory shapes that seemed to absorb radar waves rather than reflect them. In the lead aircraft's cockpit, Major Helena Viper cross-checked her weapons systems one final time. Her aircraft carried enough firepower to level a city block, but precision would be critical with friendly forces on the ground. The night sky erupted in controlled violence as 2 state-of-the-art fighters dove toward the compound with lethal intent. Viper's aircraft led the attack, its targeting systems painting hostile positions with laser precision, while her wingman provided overwatch. Raven 2, this is Raven Lead. I have multiple targets marked. Friendlies are clustered in defensive positions around the downed aircraft. Danger close authorization confirmed. Affirmative, Raven Lead. Phoenix Actual has cleared us hot for danger close support. The first pass sent precision-guided munitions into the compound's heavy weapon positions. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers across the hillside, eliminating the machine gun nests that had been pouring fire onto the downed helicopter. On the ground, Anvil watched in amazement as hostile fire ceased almost instantaneously. Phoenix Base, what the hell kind of air support is that? Zara's voice carried a note of something the operators had never heard before, personal pride mixed with profound relief. The best pilots I know, operating the most advanced aircraft on the planet. The fighters made a second pass, this time targeting the compound's main structure with surgical strikes. Each explosion was calculated to destroy enemy positions while avoiding the basement area where the hostages were held. Raven lead Phoenix Actual. Compound is neutralized. Can you provide cover for extraction? Copy Phoenix. Will maintain overwatch until your people are clear. But as the smoke cleared, Zara realized the real question wasn't whether her people could extract safely. It was whether any of them would ever look at her the same way again. The casual display of military-grade firepower from privately owned aircraft had implications that would resonate far beyond this single operation. Ghost's voice crackled through the radio with barely contained awe. Phoenix Base, I don't know who your friends are, but they just saved our lives. Zara keyed her microphone, choosing her words carefully. They're people who understand what's at stake when good operators are in trouble. What she didn't say was that those pilots had been her squadron mates, and this wasn't the first time they had fought together. The extraction helicopters arrived 37 minutes later, their crews working with practiced efficiency to evacuate the damaged aircraft and extract the DEVGRU team. As the operators were loaded aboard, each man carried questions that military protocol prevented them from voicing. Anvil was the last to board, pausing at the aircraft door to look back at the smoking compound. The precision of the airstrikes, the coordination required, the advanced technology, none of it aligned with anything he understood about civilian contractors. During the flight back to base, Ghost finally voiced what they were all thinking. Hawk, in 15 years of doing this job, have you ever seen anything like what just happened? Patterson shook his head slowly. Not from civilians. That was military-grade coordination and firepower. Question is, how does a tech billionaire have access to that kind of capability? The answer came when they landed and found Zara waiting on the tarmac. But now she wasn't alone. Standing beside her was a man whose face was familiar from countless military publications, General Patricia Hayes, commander of Special Operations Command. Gentlemen, the general's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to command. You have questions. You deserve answers. The operators formed an informal group, their gear still carrying the dust and smoke of combat. Webb joined them, his expression indicating that he was as confused as his men. Ms. Kenyatta, General Hayes continued, has been operating under deep cover for the past 5 years. Her public identity as a technology entrepreneur is genuine, but incomplete. Zara stepped forward, her posture subtly different now, more military bearing, less corporate executive. What the general is trying to say is that I've been living 2 lives. The Silicon Valley success story is real. The military background is also real. Background. Anvil's question carried the weight of the entire team's curiosity. Colonel Zara Kenyatta, United States Air Force. Call sign Phoenix. She paused, letting the implication settle. Retired 5 years ago after my squadron was tasked with developing and testing next-generation stealth aircraft. When I left the service, I took my expertise and built a private military technology company. The silence stretched as 8 elite operators processed this information. Their mysterious civilian commander was actually a former Air Force colonel with access to experimental military technology. Ghost found his voice first, the aircraft that provided air support. Are my design, flown by my former squadron mates. We maintain contracts with various government agencies for operations that require discretion. General Hayes stepped forward. The 12 aid workers you extracted tonight weren't randomly kidnapped. They were targeted because their medical research threatens a multi-billion-dollar trafficking operation. Standard military response would have triggered diplomatic complications. The compound, smoking in the distance, suddenly made more sense as part of a larger puzzle. The debriefing room felt different now, charged with the weight of revelations that had transformed their understanding of the previous night's mission. Colonel Zara Kenyatta, no longer just the mysterious billionaire, sat at the head of the table, her bearing unmistakably military despite the civilian clothes. "The aid workers you extracted," she began, pulling up photographs of 12 faces on the main screen, were specifically targeted because their research into synthetic blood substitutes threatens a trafficking network that generates $2 billion annually. Webb studied the faces, doctors, nurses, medical researchers whose only crime had been trying to save lives in one of the world's most dangerous regions. "How long have you been tracking this operation?" 3 years. Ever since my former squad leader, Major Sarah Chen, was killed during a routine medical supply run in this same region. Zara's voice carried the controlled emotion of someone who had learned to channel grief into purpose. The room fell silent. Every operator present understood the weight of losing someone from their military family. Chen was investigating unusual patterns in medical supply requisitions when her convoy was attacked. Officially, it was random bandits. Unofficially, she had discovered that someone was systematically stealing medical supplies to create artificial scarcity, driving up black market prices for basic life-saving materials. Hawk leaned forward, and the compound we hit last night was the central processing facility. The 12 aid workers had gotten too close to the truth. Zara switched the display to show a network diagram, connections spanning multiple countries, involving corrupt officials, black market dealers, and mercenary groups. Their kidnapping was meant to send a message to other humanitarian workers: stay away or face consequences. Ghost examined the network diagram with the eye of someone trained to identify patterns and vulnerabilities. "This is bigger than just one compound." "Much bigger. The operation we concluded last night was just the beginning." Zara stood and moved to the map display. "There are 17 similar facilities across 3 countries. Each one processes stolen medical supplies while using kidnapped aid workers as slave labor." The implications were staggering. What they had thought was a simple hostage rescue was actually the opening move in a campaign against a massive criminal enterprise. Anvil crossed his arms, his expression thoughtful. "Colonel, with respect, this sounds like something that should be handled through official channels. Why the private military approach?" Zara's smile was bitter. "Because 3 different intelligence agencies have people on that trafficking network's payroll. Official channels would have resulted in leaked operational plans and dead hostages." The weight of corruption at the highest levels settled over the room like a physical presence. The holographic display showed the next target: a fortified medical supply warehouse in Yemen where intelligence indicated another group of aid workers was being held. But this facility was different from the Somali compound, more heavily defended and located in an area where conventional military operations would trigger international incidents. "This is where things get complicated," Zara admitted, manipulating the display to show the political boundaries and tribal territories surrounding the target. "We're looking at a facility that's technically under the protection of a government that officially cooperates with counterterrorism efforts." "But unofficially?" Webb asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Unofficially, certain government officials are receiving substantial payments to ensure these facilities remain unmolested." She highlighted several defensive positions around the warehouse. "What makes this particularly challenging is that the hostages aren't just aid workers this time." The display showed new photographs: 2 American journalists, 3 European Union diplomats, and a Red Cross coordinator who had been investigating the medical supply thefts. High-value targets with international visibility, Ghost observed. Their disappearance won't go unnoticed for long. Exactly, which means we have maybe 72 hours before this becomes a diplomatic crisis that prevents any military response. Zara turned to face the assembled operators. I'm not going to lie to you. This mission is significantly more dangerous than last night's operation. The room fell silent as each man processed the tactical challenges. The Yemen facility was located in hostile territory, defended by professional mercenaries rather than local militants, and contained hostages whose deaths would trigger international consequences. Patterson spoke first. What kind of support are we looking at? The same aircraft and pilots from last night, plus additional resources I've been developing for exactly this scenario. Zara's expression grew serious. But I want to be clear, this is volunteer only. What we're doing operates in a legal gray area that could have career implications. One by one, each operator nodded their acceptance. Whatever Zara Kenyatta had been before this mission, she was now someone who had earned their trust through competence and shared risk. The planning session extended through the day as they developed multiple contingencies for what would be their most complex operation yet. The safe house overlooked the Red Sea, its position chosen to provide clear sight lines in all directions while maintaining the appearance of a legitimate business operation. Zara stood on the rooftop terrace, secure communicator pressed to her ear as she coordinated final preparations for the Yemen operation. Raven lead Phoenix Actual. Weather window looks optimal for tomorrow night. Are your aircraft ready? Major Cross's voice carried the confidence of someone who had flown combat missions in 3 different theaters. Affirmative, Phoenix. Both birds are loaded and flight tested. We'll have your people covered. Through her binoculars, Zara could see the target warehouse 17 kilometers away, its concrete walls and guard towers clearly visible against the desert landscape. Intelligence indicated that 15 hostages were being held in the facility's underground levels, while the main floor processed stolen medical supplies destined for black market distribution. Behind her, the DEVGRU team conducted final equipment checks with the methodical precision that marked elite operators. Their gear had been modified with her technology, enhanced communication systems, real-time tactical displays, and weapons that interfaced directly with her surveillance network. Colonel, Anvil approached, using her military rank now that her true identity had been revealed. The team is ready, but I have to ask, how many more of these facilities are we going to hit? Zara lowered her binoculars and turned to face him. All of them. Every single facility in this network is going to be shut down, their operators captured or eliminated, and the trafficking network destroyed. That's a tall order for 8 operators and 2 pilots. It's a tall order for 8 operators and 2 pilots operating under traditional constraints, she corrected. But we're not operating under traditional constraints. As if summoned by her words, a sleek aircraft appeared on the horizon, angular and predatory, moving at speeds that conventional fighters couldn't match. It was followed by a second identical craft, both maintaining perfect formation as they conducted a reconnaissance pass over the target area. Ghost watched the aircraft with professional appreciation. Those aren't just modified military hardware, are they? No, they're completely original designs, built from the ground up to exceed anything currently in military inventories. Zara's voice carried quiet pride. When I left the Air Force, I took everything I had learned about aerospace engineering and pushed it several generations beyond current technology. The implications were staggering. A private military contractor with technology that exceeded what major world powers possessed fundamentally changed the balance of power in regional conflicts. The question, Hawke observed, is what happens when this is over, when the trafficking network is destroyed and these hostages are freed. Zara was quiet for a long moment, watching the sun set over the desert. Then we find the next network. There's always another network. The Yemen facility's security was more sophisticated than the Somali compound, but Zara's surveillance had mapped every guard position, every sensor, every possible contingency. The operation would require precision timing and perfect coordination between ground forces and air support. As the team made final preparations, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Her technology provided overwhelming advantages in intelligence gathering, but it also meant that anyone with sufficient resources could potentially track their activities. Phoenix Actual, this is Overwatch, the radio crackled with an unfamiliar voice. We're detecting electronic surveillance focused on your position. Someone is definitely monitoring your communications. Zara's blood chilled. If their communications were compromised, the entire operation could be walking into another trap. The secure communications center hummed with electronic activity as Zara worked to identify the source of the surveillance. Multiple screens showed signal analysis, frequency patterns, and triangulation data that painted a disturbing picture. Someone with military-grade intelligence capabilities was actively monitoring their operations. Raven Lead, Phoenix Actual. We may be compromised. Unknown party is conducting electronic surveillance on our position. Copy Phoenix. We're detecting similar activity focused on our aircraft. Professional grade, definitely not local capabilities. The pieces of the puzzle began forming a darker picture. The trafficking network they were hunting had resources and connections that extended far beyond what she had initially assessed. Corrupt government officials were one thing, but active military-grade counter-surveillance suggested involvement from major intelligence agencies. Webb approached her workstation, his expression grim. "Colonel, we're getting reports of unusual military vehicle movement in our operational area. Looks like someone is positioning assets to intercept us." Zara studied the tactical display, showing vehicle concentrations, forming a rough perimeter around their planned approach routes to the target facility. The positioning was too precise to be coincidental. "They know we're coming," she concluded. "The question is whether they know exactly when and how." Ghost joined the conversation, his gear already loaded and ready for immediate departure. "Ma'am, if we're walking into another ambush, maybe we should reconsider the approach." But Zara was already formulating contingencies. "No, 15 people are counting on us, and every hour we delay gives the network more time to relocate or eliminate evidence." She turned to address the full team. "We're changing the operational plan. Instead of avoiding their surveillance, we're going to use it against them." The new plan was audacious in its simplicity. Instead of trying to approach the facility covertly, they would create multiple false signatures to confuse enemy tracking. Zara's aircraft would provide not just fire support but active electronic warfare, jamming enemy communications while providing false positional data. Raven Flight, Phoenix Actual. I need you to paint false radar signatures across 17 different positions simultaneously. Make it look like we're approaching from every direction at once. Copy Phoenix. Electronic warfare package is loaded and ready. As the team prepared for departure, Zara made a decision that would fundamentally change the nature of their operation. She activated a secure communication channel that connected her directly to the highest levels of military command. "SOCOM Actual, this is Phoenix. I need to report that our operation has been compromised by what appears to be state-level intelligence assets." The response came immediately from General Hayes herself. "Phoenix, are you requesting extraction?" "Negative. I'm requesting permission to engage any hostile forces that interfere with hostage rescue operations, regardless of their national affiliation." The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds before the response came. Phoenix, you are authorized to use any means necessary to complete the mission and protect American lives. The authorization carried implications that extended far beyond a simple hostage rescue. Zara now had carte blanche to engage enemy forces that might include personnel from nominally allied nations. As the modified Black Hawks lifted off into the desert night, each operator understood that they were crossing a threshold from which there might be no return. The flight to the target took 37 minutes, during which Zara's aircraft conducted the most sophisticated electronic warfare operation in the region's history. Enemy radar screens showed dozens of inbound contacts, all apparently heading toward the warehouse facility from different vectors. Phoenix Base, Anvil Actual. We're seeing significant confusion in enemy communications. Your birds are doing good work up there. Copy Anvil. Maintain radio discipline. We're about to get very busy. The warehouse facility erupted in defensive activity as guards scrambled to respond to what appeared to be a massive coordinated assault from multiple directions. Searchlights swept the desert, while heavy weapons were repositioned to cover approaches that contained nothing but electronic ghosts. Raven Lead, Phoenix Actual. Enemy forces are dispersed and confused. You are cleared to engage all defensive positions. The night sky lit up with precision strikes as Zara's fighters eliminated guard towers and weapon positions with surgical accuracy. Each explosion was calculated to destroy military targets while preserving the structural integrity of the building containing the hostages. On the ground, Anvil's team moved through the chaos with deadly efficiency. The enemy's confusion provided perfect cover for their approach to the warehouse's main entrance. Phoenix Anvil Actual, we're at the breach point, ready to make entry. Copy Anvil. Hostage location confirmed in basement level. Be advised, we're detecting movement of additional enemy forces toward your position. What Zara didn't tell them was that the additional forces included vehicles with military markings from a country that was supposed to be supporting counterterrorism operations in the region. The basement of the warehouse facility was a maze of concrete corridors and holding cells that spoke to the systematic nature of the trafficking operation. Anvil led his team through the complex with tactical lights cutting through the darkness, their movements coordinated through real-time updates from Zara's surveillance network. Phoenix Anvil Actual. We've located the first group of hostages. 3 aid workers, 2 journalists. All appear to be in stable condition. Copy Anvil. Remaining hostages should be in Section C, approximately 50 meters southeast of your current position. But as the team moved deeper into the facility, they discovered evidence that the trafficking network was more extensive than anyone had imagined. Rooms filled with stolen medical supplies, computer systems tracking international shipments, and documentation indicating cooperation from officials in multiple governments. Ghost paused at a computer terminal, downloading data that would prove crucial to understanding the full scope of the criminal enterprise. Phoenix, we're looking at shipping manifests showing operations across 7 countries. This network is massive. Copy Ghost. Secure what intelligence you can, but primary mission remains hostage extraction. The final group of hostages was found in a heavily secured area that required breaching multiple locked doors. Among them was Dr. Elena Vasquez, the Red Cross coordinator, whose investigation had triggered her kidnapping. Dr. Vasquez, Anvil spoke as his team secured the area, I'm with the U.S. military. We're here to get you out. The relief on her face was visible even in the dim light of tactical illumination. The medical supplies, they're stealing massive quantities and creating artificial shortages. People are dying because basic medicines aren't available. Ma'am, we'll address that. Right now, we need to get you and the others to safety. But as the extraction began,